Hello and welcome to this episode of the B2B Club, bringing industry-leading guests directly to you. The B2B Club takes a regular deep dive into topics ranging from marketing to marketplaces, personalization to payments, revenue to regulation, and so much more. If you want to be in the know about all things B2B e-commerce, start your listening journey with us today. My name is Ollie and I am a campaign manager at Hakodo. And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about the fundamentals of building a B2B e-commerce website. For a long time, e-commerce was seen as an unsuitable sales channel for B2B merchants and played second fiddle to in-person or telesales, with many people pointing to the increased complexity and higher order values associated with the B2B ordering process. However, since 2020 and the COVID-19 outbreak, e-commerce has become increasingly viable and attractive for B2B merchants and is no longer seen as a nice to have, but an essential part of a B2B sales strategy. Today, we will be looking at the similarities and differences between B2C and B2B e-commerce, and what those mean for the structures and design of B2B e-commerce websites, as well as outlining some key strategies and top tips that B2B merchants can use on their platform. Today, I'm joined by two guests, Chris Mattingly and Rhys Laval, who are very experienced in the world of B2B e-commerce. So much so that they are both co-founders of Sparklayer, a specialist e-commerce solution that brings powerful B2B features such as customer-specific pricing, customer account areas, B2B payment methods, and much more to B2B Shopify stores. Chris and Rhys, it's great to have you both on the podcast today. Chris, if you can just tell me a bit about how you and Rhys met and how Sparklayer came into being.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you very much for having us on the podcast. So I'm Chris. I'm one of the co-founders of Sparklayer. My background was actually starting in a company called Bluebolt way back in 2006. I was the original web designer way back in the day. We spent the first 10 to 12 years actually building our own e-commerce platform. At its peak, it was a very successful system. Transacted over $400 million a year. Has a very big UK merchants using it. For a variety of reasons, we actually decided to effectively sunset that platform. But we had a very good underlying technology which we were quite keen to see what we could do with. This was back in 2020. Rhys popped up. Rhys happened to be a former team member of mine at Bluebolt, and he suggested actually trying to build out a very niche product from this platform. And obviously B2B was something we had a lot of experience with. The platform itself was a B2C and B2B platform. Together with Rhys, we came up with the idea of creating a niche product, and that then evolved into the Sparklayer product. At the same time, with the Bluebolt company, we actually pivoted to a platform called Shopify, obviously very well known now. The big thing we noticed was within Shopify, there was a huge gap in B2B, very, very underdeveloped, not a lot of functionality. So we noticed a big gap there. So we effectively honed the Sparklayer product into essentially like a layer on top of the Shopify system. We used a lot of the functionality we had. We were able to get things like, different pricing structures working, building out lots of B2B specific functionality, which we'll go through in a second. And it really became a great foundation to build on. At the same time, we were quite surprised such big platforms such as Shopify didn't have a B2B presence. And that really accelerated our growth from the first 6 months or so. I guess from a broader perspective, obviously Shopify is one of our main focuses right now. The product always was built to be a supportable, call it a headless platform. We knew at some point, there were other platforms we'd want to move on to. So again, it just presented huge opportunities for us. And I guess in terms of the problems it helped solve, it ultimately let merchants on Shopify enable a B2B channel, which again we'll come to in a second in terms of how that works specifically.
Cool. And what are your roles within the company? So who's responsible for which areas? Don't know if you want to take that one, Rhys.
Yeah, no, totally. So I'm my background is tech. So I've done a lot of systems architecture, developing, and heads of teams. So I cover all the things technology. And I also serve as kind of a client point of contact for anything techie. And Chris covers anything from product operations, sales, and long-term strategy.
Yeah, I suppose as a small team, we are quite multidiscipline. We try and share the responsibilities as we start growing out the team with specific roles.
Nice. And I think you touched on it a little bit there, but if you can just tell me a bit more about why Sparklayer exists and the problem that you're trying to solve for B2B merchants.
Yeah, no, totally. I think within the B2B space, there isn't many products that are non-enterprise. So if we look at enterprise, there's Fabric. You could build out Magento if you wanted to. you could build out commerce, BigCommerce. These all have slight B2B implementations, but for the lower end of the market, B2B implementations are painful, arguably much more complex than B2C. They're really hard to integrate. There's lots of things such as product rules, product pricing, lack of automation, and we still hear from some companies that are moving away from using faxes. So simply, what is our goal? Ultimately, to save time, and this brings B2B from a manual world, and we bring a lot more automation to this process, allowing the end merchant and the end merchant's customers to have complete self-service. I guess a few things of what we do: price rules, providing a B2B portal, and the main thing is bringing all the systems together, such as the ERPs of the world, the CRMs, and not just Shopify or the underlying e-commerce platform. And then finally, how do we do this? I think it's really about bringing it together really quickly and painlessly, where it's just a few lines of code, and that kind of it works out of the box.
Yeah. And I suppose the big thing is merchants get to use our existing websites. I mean, obviously building websites is a very costly, time-consuming process. Rather than actually having a separate B2C, separate B2B, merchants can actually use their main website for both channels. And that in itself means a huge selling point. It means there's operational efficiencies, obviously big cost savings. Obviously Rhys touched upon saving time. That's really what our purpose is. Really, we're there to help make life easier for those wanting to grow their B2B channel.
Yeah, that's great. I think from my experience at Hakoda, speaking to sort of the tech guys and the sales people, it does seem that, there's sort of so many layers to the B2B e-commerce, like you're talking about connecting up with ERP systems and stuff like that. So I think, it seems like you guys have really got a great product and trying to solve some real pains for B2B merchants out there. So as mentioned in the introduction, we're going to try and dive into what it takes to build a B2B e-commerce website, and also look at some of the tips and best practices. But first of all, I would like to start off with quite a broad question. So what do you think are sort of the key differences between B2C and B2B e-commerce?
I mean, it's a really good question. I think that topic in itself could be an entire podcast, really. I suppose at a high level, there are some really sort of key differences which we can sort of talk about. I guess the first and most obvious is the audience. Obviously, in the B2C world, you're effectively targeting individual consumers, whereas B2B, it's more about businesses, companies, maybe even organizations. So, by nature of being a different audience, there are obviously different ways of approaching the B2B website. Purchase volumes, B2C is very sort of quick fire, smaller purchases, lower order values, perhaps more repeat ordering, whereas at B2B, you're looking at sort of high volumes of goods, typically very much higher order values by nature of being businesses and companies looking to make the purchases. Another big things around consumer behavior. Obviously, B2C customers are very sort of cost sensitive. Want things to be quick and easy, demand convenience. Lots of things around personalization. That's obviously a huge sort of hot topic in e-commerce. I guess whereas B2B is more around relationships. That's a huge factor in the B2B journey. They're not there just to do one-off purchases. They're there to build relationships. Obviously, they still want the nice user journey. They still want efficiency. They're not sort of there just to have a one-off sale. It's more about the long-term side of it.
Yeah, I guess also in other aspects, the sales cycle, B2C e-commerce transactions are very single visit. You go for a few pages, you pick a product, you go through the checkout, and you probably won't access that website in a couple of months. But actually in the B2B cycle, this could be high volume transactions that you go back and again repeat order. Even from the independent shops, they're going to constantly rebuy that fashion items as they start selling out. But even to the Sainsbury's, they're going to consistently buy again and again. So I guess looking at it another way, there's multiple touch points, there's negotiations, and this could be even approvals from different buyers and companies before the purchase is made. Other things, payment terms, such as Hakoda, I guess is where you guys come in. The B2C e-commerce transaction usually require an upfront payment, obviously a little bit different in the current state of mind with B2B, buy now, pay later, coming around and around again. B2B transactions involve more flexible payment terms, credit invoicing, installment plans, or maybe payment after the shipment. I guess a big trend we're seeing is many retailers are opting to use their existing B2C website for the purpose of B2B. They put a lot of money for an agency to create this on-brand looking website. Why not use that for your B2C site instead of using an independent portal that maybe you could just put a logo and a few colors on?
Yeah, nice. I think we'll talk a bit later in detail about sort of, the repurposing of B2C websites for B2B. And then what do you think are the key things to consider when building a B2B e-commerce website? And maybe if we can start at the beginning, at the start of the user journey, the login and registration process, what do you think are the key considerations at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are some fundamentals every B2B merchant should be considering, especially from the customer user experience. I mean, ultimately, the goal is to make things easier for the end customer. As Rhys says, things are becoming more sort of B2C centric in terms of user journeys. The clunky old days of difficult to use portals, that's slowly disappearing. I guess in terms of focusing on the big things from the starting point, it really does. So start with the login process. Very often, B2B merchants might have a sort of fully restricted website where the customer has to log in to see pricing, to see products, to actually place orders. And that in itself does require some variety of moderation process. Very often you see registration flows where perhaps someone who wants to actually become a B2B customer, they might have to actually apply for access. So that involves classic filling out a form, but I guess behind the scenes there is typically some variety of verification process. So like Shopify, many other platforms, they've made that very easy. It's very easy to create these forms which people can actually use to apply for access. So primarily it's around login and registration. That's really how it would differ from the B2C user journey. Obviously, the B2C customer, you wouldn't log in first to see your pricing. B2B, you do have to actually, effectively prove who you are to gain access. And once they log in, that effectively unlocks the website for the customer to then go through and start placing the order. Probably secondly, we'll probably focus on the actual purchasing process of products. As we mentioned before, it's all about speed. In this very sort of time conscious world we're living in, people want to get in and get out very quickly within the B2B space. And that in itself translates to making sure your website's very usable, making sure it's easy to find products, you have a good search system, easy to actually access the products which you want to purchase. So we're seeing a big trend around, I guess in its sort of rawest form, really good interfaces to actually create orders. On B2B, you typically see some variety of quick ordering where you can actually go down a list, start adding stuff to an order. You might see things such as spreadsheet importing. Imagine you're a customer who wants to buy 600 items in one go. You're not going to go through 600 times. You're probably going to import a spreadsheet to very quickly populate the order. Other things around, because anywhere where you're actually displaying products, is make it very quick to actually add those to your basket. Product purchasing typically also involves making sure the interface itself allows configurations to be factored in. Very often you'll see things like pack size rules, perhaps minimum, maximum quantities the customer has to purchase. The interface itself has to make sure that's very clear, very obvious for the customer in terms of essentially what they need to add to the basket to check out. You might see things around quantity discounting. So that's where you have effectively price breaks based on the volume of goods you purchase. Buy one for £10, buy 10 and it's £4, for example. So the purchasing experience becomes, more geared around quick buying, whereas with B2C, perhaps the consumer is spending a bit of time, reading through the product page, looking at technical specifications, looking at perhaps some of the marketing around it. B2B, they typically know exactly what they want. They just want to find the product quickly and actually go through the checkout process.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And also what you say there about the quick ordering and the fact that in B2B, there's a lot of repeat transactions. So they might be buying stuff for their shop to sell on and stock. So they know what they want to get it quickly. Yeah, I think just adding those steps in to sort of make it as quick and easy as possible. That's a really important thing. One quick question I just wanted to touch on, it's just come into my head about, you mentioned about the whole login and registration process. Obviously in B2B, in the world of B2B e-commerce, there might be multiple people within the organization who are purchasers. So I wonder, what your thoughts are about that and the considerations that merchants might have to think about for that.
Yeah, that's definitely a requirement. Typically you might have a company with multiple individuals actually placing the orders. So I guess the platform itself needs to be able to support having effectively multiple users under the same sort of company. Shopify itself actually supports this pretty well. But the login process has to factor in the fact you might have multiple individuals actually trying to access it. So you might have perhaps validation on the company domain name. There's all sorts of technical things you could consider in terms of actually making that work. But obviously with B2C, it's all about that, the end single consumer, whereas B2B, there might be a collective actually making the purchase. That collective might have some variety of moderation process internally. Perhaps only certain individuals can add to basket, whereas others can place the orders. Perhaps only some people can request quotes. So typically you might see some variety of sort of privilege access sort of built into the sort of purchasing process, which can get very complicated when you have to factor in different roles and sort of access levels. So that's definitely a big thing to factor in.
And then also, what are your thoughts about sort of customization and personalization? Because obviously, that seems to be a big trend in the world of sort of everything at the moment. Like, how can we personalize and make it like super relevant to people? How can merchants do this in the context of B2B e-commerce? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's something that's coming more apparent as time goes on. I think hiding and showing specific product ranges for specific customers is a massive thing. Changing that product catalog is huge. And I think actually as we go forward, recommendations engines are going to have to see how they work in the B2B manner. So recommendations and customization in terms of what you're recommending, like upselling to the customer, is going to be a bigger thing as time goes on. And you've got to make sure you're splitting that out from the B2C journey to the B2B journey, because it's very different what the buying habits are. And this includes out of stock messaging. A B2B customer also might want to get out of stock alerts. So if you think a lot of those B2C things apply to the B2B customer base, but it's a very different way of using it. You just got to make sure you segregate maybe the data behind the scenes, or look at how it could be more accurate, appropriately used, I guess.
And I suppose in customization as well, that can include actually customizing the product. Obviously if you're a fashion B2B merchant, you might want customers to be able to customize, I don't know, perhaps the text that shows on a product, for example. We are seeing that more and more within the B2B space. Those obviously are B2B merchants looking to go into B2B. They want to carry through that same, that same functionality. So again, that can get very complicated in actually executing it. But that's definitely a big consideration. How can your platform support the ability to let customers effectively make personalizations and customizations? You touched on the ability for customers to quickly reorder. I mean, that's a huge factor within the B2B customer user experience. We broadly term that as sort of self-service. So basically, empowering the customer with as much control as possible to sort of look after their account. So obviously reordering, that's a big thing. And perhaps you're a coffee shop, you want to reorder the same product every 6 weeks. You need the ability to very quickly log in, add that same order to your basket and go through the checkout. So you will definitely see that as a big requirement around the user journey. In terms of self-service, it's all about making sure customers have access whenever they want. One of our recent customers had their B2B operation transformed by making it almost like a 24/7 access. Any of their customers could log in, they could place orders. They didn't have to phone up the sales rep to place the order. And that's a trend we're seeing more and more. People don't want to have to go through old-fashioned channels. They won't have to email through an order, phone through an order. Rhys mentioned faxing an order. That's still actually a thing that happens. People want to log in, see their accounts and place orders. My account itself, in terms of actual functionality, you typically expect to see things like easy order tracking, giving the customer a very simple list of orders they've placed, give the ability to track shipment status, the ability to download invoices. That's a huge thing. Again, rather than having to manually request an invoice, being able to log in, press a button, download a PDF. Big thing we're seeing is around what we call shopping lists. Again, it sort of ties into the sort of multi-user account, whereby customers can effectively add stuff to a wish list. Create a list of items they want to purchase. Perhaps have that sent through to a colleague to check. Again, being able to access that from a my account area is really beneficial. You've got standard things like address book management, being able to easy add and edit addresses. Perhaps the B2B customer wants to ship to a certain store, giving them the easy ability to do that. And finally, what we probably recommend is having some variety of what we call sort of credit balance checking, being able to log in. Very often in the B2B world, customers might work on credit. You've got £10,000 credit, your limit's X, making sure the customer can very easily see that and very easily have visibility. So self-service, it's really about automation. And to Rhys's point before, saving time, that's really where that can really come into its own.
Yeah, I think now would be a good time to maybe move on to talk a bit more about pricing. So I think we might have touched upon it a bit already, but I was just wondering if you can let me know, why can pricing structures in B2B be more complex than in B2C?
Yeah, no, totally. I think in the B2B space, different customers simply get different price lists is the end goal because they're how much they're ordering. If they're a supermarket versus an independent shop, the discounting is going to be very different. But also it can matter because of a variety of different ways, such as one company buying by pallet, one company buying by container load. And you can boil these down to either quantity rules, i.e. you must buy a minimum order of X, or if you buy X, you get it at this rate. And then, I guess it simply boils down to people want cheaper rates if they're buying huge amounts. Outside of pricing, though, there's shipping rates, very different shipping rates from B2C to B2B. And then finally, on a cart level, you may have other specific rules, such as minimum order amounts, maximum order amounts. Maybe specific team members can only order X depending on their privilege too. But outside of pricing, also tax. In Sparklayer, we show everything as net because most of the B2B world works like that. Some people do want to see gross, and also some customers that will not be charged tax at the end because of their location or their tax registration or reverse charges. So there's a variety of things around pricing and how it's showed on the front end that kind of depend on the end customer, and that feeds into the registration flow, how you're capturing that customer, and then how you're choosing what group to put them in.
And then I guess, being able to personalize along the way for them so that they can see exactly what's relevant for them. That's, I think that's really good. And then also maybe similar to the pricing and, towards more of the end of the user journey, talking about the payment methods and the checkout experience. What are sort of the key things to consider here for B2B companies? They don't want leaky checkouts. They want people to actually convert and make the transaction. So what do you think are the key things to consider here?
Yeah, I think firstly, like B2C, it should be smooth and seamless. It should be a really great user journey, like any kind of system. It just needs to be, to get the customer to the end in the quickest amount. These people working in their jobs, they don't want to be stuck in a checkout that doesn't work or is hard to use. But from the payment expectations and the customer addresses as you're going through, some B2B systems, you're allowed to have multiple ship-to addresses. So then you may need to select the specific what parcels or packages are going to which addresses. And then finally, I guess as you go through further, the payment expectations. Every B2B customer kind of expects different payment expectations depending on what contract they may have the customer. They may want to use Hakodu, where Hakodu takes up the financial side of things. They might have net terms set up front. They may have credit limits involved, they may pay in installments, or finally pay by invoice is something we quite commonly see where an invoice is sent and then payment is made, and then finally at the end the shipment is done after the payment. But I think the main thing is simplicity is key. You've got to have less options, especially for room for error. The buyer may not be aware of the account options that are set up by the accounts team and things like that. So keep it simple, just give them what they need. And I guess lastly, a lot of this is to do with the data. So payment methods and pricing. This really depends on where the source of truth is. So most of the time, the source of truth is either in an ERP, an accountancy platform, where you need to feed in the pricing data, what price list they're assigned to, maybe what discounts they get, what pricing structures, are there any contract pricing, where they've got specific pricing for like one specific customer. And this, comes from the source of truth, the ERP, the PIM, the CRM, and these generally involve an integration. And this is the costly part of building a B2B website out. So what we see is more and more merchants are opting to centralize their systems for really easier ongoing maintenance. I don't have two distinct systems, one for B2C, one for B2B, integrate them into one store, such as Shopify, maybe over two stores, maybe over one store. But the data really is quite a complicated thing. It may come from multiple different systems behind the scenes, and it's all going to be fed into that customer journey at the end of it.
touching on that payment methods piece there, it can vary quite a lot by industry as well. Like businesses in sort of the construction, building industry, a lot of their buyers are used to paying on one monthly consolidated invoice. Whereas maybe what you were saying about a coffee shop who's ordering goods for their business, they might have invoices raised per transaction. So I think it depends on the industry as well. And also keep the idea of keeping it simple as well. You see so many checkouts that just have these explosion of payment options, and there's probably quite like an actually confusing experience for the person that's actually checking out in the end.
Especially in the B2C, be it buy now, pay later space, where there's so many options that sometimes you're like, what's the difference between these buy now, pay later systems? We don't know.
We touched on it like a little bit throughout both of your answers there. I think what you were talking about, with the pricing and the including VAT versus excluding VAT, we certainly see that a lot. If sort of your advice for maybe like a company that has a B2B and a B2C side, what would your advice be? Would you build two different websites or have them combined into one? Or
I suppose the biggest trend we're seeing at the moment is lots of merchants trying to combine both B2B and B2C. You might hear the term sort of hybrid or blended. Saying before, merchants typically have a very good sort of B2C website. Why not use that to actually serve the B2B customers? Especially with a lot of platforms these days, Shopify, BigCommerce, they do lend themselves very well for having this sort of combined experience. And it ties into what Rhys was saying around centralization. Trying to keep everything in a single location has huge benefits. Operationally, looking after it, definitely some huge pros to actually having a single website for both channels. On the sort of hybrid approach, so hybrid that's where you have to combine B2B and B2C. I guess the big advantage is having a very consistent sort of brand and user experience. Whether it's a B2C customer or a B2B customer, we're still landing on effectively the same website. They see the nice branding, the nice user flow, nice product pages, and especially in today's environment, B2B customers do expect the same sort of consistent experience. Touched on before about operational efficiencies, having a single store, having the orders come into the same place, having the same catalog, the same CMS. That could save a ton of time for the sort of people working behind the scenes. And that's typically one of the big reasons why people would do a hybrid setup. And having one platform for everything means, down to like the apps you use, everything can be shared across both channels very effectively. Yeah, so hybrid's probably the big trend we're seeing. Historically, 3-4 years ago, you might create a totally separate website. Again, comes at huge expense, huge operational costs. But now we are seeing the hybrid. That said, there are definitely reasons why you would have a standalone store. Probably the biggest reason is around stock control. If you've got both B2B customers and B2C customers on the same store, effectively they're using the same stock pool. So you could very easily have a B2B customer wiping out your entire sort of product collection. So stock is where you would typically sort of separate them both out. Perhaps you might want a totally different product catalog for B2B customers. That can become quite complicated to do on a single store. Again, trying to work out how to vary products based on the customer can be quite difficult. And if you were wanting to have a very different look and feel, or perhaps you wanted to have a sort of login page before people could access it, that game might lend itself to having a sort of standalone B2B store. So yeah, hybrid versus standalone. That's probably a question we get a couple of times a week from our customers. Both have pros and cons. But I would say the hybrid model is what people are tending to opt for, just on account of it making it easier for people, and ultimately saving cost and time really.
One other negative, I guess, can be analytics. Sometimes the analytics can be hard to pull apart, but actually what we're seeing is there's lots of workarounds for this. So generally that's not a problem that we see often. It just takes some ingenious solutions to ensure the analytics work well after go live of the B2B store.
Yeah, I guess, just thinking about it from my marketing perspective might be, the messaging might be different for B2B versus B2C, but then, it sounds like there are solutions like yours out there which can tailor it to depending on who's logged in.
And the things like sort of changing the homepage based on a B2C versus B2B is actually quite easy to do these days. So even like promotions, you can distinguish between both channels pretty easily.
But it takes a little bit of thought. I think the main thing is you may have different set of CMS pages. You may have different header, different nav, but it's also looking at the complexity. If you're looking for hugely different websites, long-term maintainability, you may want to split them out. I think, again, it depends. Yeah, I think the big thing is how different you want it. If you're looking for something that's slightly different, I'd definitely go for hybrid. If you're looking for something that's vastly different, splitting out is probably a better solution from a maintenance side of things.
Okay, that's great. So I think, if we're going to like take one key message or one key takeaway for the listeners today, and to apply it to their B2B e-commerce website, what do you think that would be?
Yeah, I think the key thing is the combining thing is a really strong concept, because a lot of direct-to-consumer brands have put a lot of money into a B2C website. They've gone to an agency, they've taken their brand, they've put it directly into that website using lots of money, lots of marketing thought. Why not fully use that for your B2B experience? In reality, a B2B website is your B2C website with a few added extras that we spoke about today, such as payment methods, price lists, the bit of data integration, and then at the end of it, your B2B customer, why should they not get the UX UI journey of a B2C customer, which is heavily thought out?
And the big message is around convergence. There is a convergence between B2C and B2B. As Rhys says, why not use your existing foundation to open up your new channel?
Yeah, well, I think we've definitely done a good job at covering a lot of the fundamentals. It's covered quite a lot of ground. So yeah, thanks both Chris and Rhys for your inputs today. And I know that the Sparklayer website definitely has a lot of good resources on this. So if anyone is out there and wants to sort of look at tips or tricks that they can apply to their business, then definitely check out the Sparklayer website. Their resources section is very useful. Thank you very much for today. You provided some really great insights, and I hope that everything continues to go from strength to strength for Sparklayer. And I'd also like to thank everyone for tuning in to another episode of the B2B Club. We really hope that you enjoyed it and found the discussion useful. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast, and you can find the links to follow Chris, Rhys, and Sparklayer in the episode description. We hope to see you soon on the next episode. Thanks.